Well, now, it's all happening as we speak. Laura's just coming off air, having met the Prime Minister. She's got Henry there. I'm in London, but the action's in Liverpool.
The action is in Liverpool. Would be fun if you were here next year, Paddy. You should come too.
What happened?
Sounds like a plan.
What happened? What was the body language
What happened? Well, the Prime Minister came in to speak to us and the nation this morning. It's quite a long time since he's done a big live TV interview. We couldn't find one since March when he last spoke to us about Ukraine. And I thought, and we'll get into this on today's newscast, he seemed to be in rather punchier form than of late, Henry.
Yeah, I think he was pepped up. I think he needed to be, given the months he's had, the weeks he's had, the days he's had, the 14 months he's had since he entered Downing Street. I mean, things have not necessarily gone as well as he would have liked them to. And clearly, the mood of the next few days that he and his team want to project is that they've got the energy and the ideas to take on reform, and it's very clearly reform, and I think this interview was the first opportunity for him to signal that.
Well, there was certainly lots of news from it, so should we get on with it, Paddy? All that news on this Sunday's newscast.
Hello, it's Paddy at BH Broadcasting House in London.
And it's Laura in the lovely Museum of Liverpool in Liverpool.
And it is Henry sitting next to Laura in the lovely Museum of Liverpool in Liverpool.
And I hope if you've got this only in your ears, maybe try and watch it on iPlayer or something, just so we can show you this beautiful view of this fine city and the Mersey in the back of our shop. Yeah, it's gorgeous,
it is,
isn't it?
absolutely.
And we love being here for our broadcasts.
It's gorgeous. It should be there all the time. It's not difficult to see why they film so many films, including the Gothic ones there. It's gorgeous.
It is. Beautiful Liverpool harbour side. So I always feel a bit after a big interview, a bit in a daze and not quite sure what really happened. So Henry, if you're writing the story for the BBC website or for the news outlets that you're going to do later for the day or for the newspapers, what would you be scribbling about immediately?
I think so usually the question, to take people sort of inside the machine, the question we'll all ask ourselves as journalists after an interview like that is, what was the best line? By which we mean, what was the most interesting or new or provocative thing that the Prime Minister said? And the answer in this case, I think pretty clearly, is when he said that Nigel Farage's immigration policy unveiled at the start of this week is racist.
You said that proposal is immoral, to deport people who are already here if they don't pass more stringent rules. Do you think it's a racist policy?
Well, I do think that it is a racist policy. I do think it's immoral. It needs to be called out for what it is.
And do you think that Reform UK is trying to appeal to racists?
No, I think that there are plenty of people who either vote reform or are thinking of voting reform who are frustrated. They had 14 years of failure under the Conservatives. They want us to change things. They may have voted Labour a year ago, and they want the change to come more quickly. I actually do understand that, because if for 14 years your living standards haven't got any better and your public services have declined, then of course you want change.
Now, we knew the Prime Minister was going to step up the language and the nature of his attacks on Reform UK this week, but accusing Reform UK of racism, accusing Nigel Farage essentially of racism, is a step change, and I think that is the clearest sort of news-making moment from that interview.
And it will be very interesting, Paddy, I think, to see what the effect of that will be. Because on the one hand, it might ginger up people in the Labour movement, and maybe people listening to this who've been feeling, actually, I'm really uncomfortable about the way that some of the discussion in politics is going in the UK these days, and I would like my leaders to stand up and say something as bold as that. Others might feel, hang on a minute, you're offending millions of people who've been telling pollsters for a long time now that actually they quite fancy Reform UK.
Well, and interestingly, he tried to carry off quite a delicate balance, because he said the policy was racist, but then he also said he didn't think that Nigel Farage in general or Reform UK voters necessarily were racist. And whether that is seen as a sort of reasonable distinction by people who might be wavering between Labour or between other parties and voting for Reform UK, I think we'll have to find out. But I think, a lot lies for the Prime Minister on whether that distinction pays off for him.
Paddy?
Yeah, well, just to say that Nigel Farage is in the Sundays saying that the previous Saturday speech, in which he called Reform the enemy, was close to incitement. So Nigel Farage is not going to take well to being told that his policy is racist, and by implication that, as you said, Henry, it's by implication he could be too. So we think it's very important to say Hillary Clinton made a mistake, it's widely seen, when she called Trump supporters deplorables. And it's been a large part of the chattering around what went wrong in America for the left, centre left, that they never felt any kind of kinship with half of the country. So the polls say, more than a quarter of voters are flirting with a policy that the Prime Minister thinks is racist.
And so much, I think, of this week is going to be about the Labour Party trying to say, no, we're the real patriots. And the way in which we approach all sorts of policies, not just immigration, is more patriotic than the way in which Reform UK do. And the reason I know that, by the way, is that I've been leaked the lines to take that government ministers have actually been sent for this week.
Oh, tremendous.
So let me share a bit of it with you now so that listeners at home can construct their own personal bingo cards for the coming week. It's called the Conference Narrative, and it says, true patriotism means choosing renewal for the common good rather than stoking grievances and seeking to divide. Labour will set out a patriotic case for a programme of national renewal. So it goes on, I think, great length. But, I think it is clear from that Keir Starmer is trying to sort of actually construct quite a detailed argument about what patriotism means to him. Whether that is bolstered or hindered by using the R word, I think we'll see over the coming days.
And it is also a bit of a stretch, is it not, even in a carefully constructed political narrative to say, patriotism, yes, NHS appointments. He tries to do that in our interview, because I said, what does patriotic renewal actually mean? And he did then go through, he'd obviously read the script. Here are all the things that he believes the government has achieved, and more NHS appointments and all these sorts of things.
Well, patriotic renewal is fixing the problems in the country that we inherited, but changing the country as we do so. Let me just give you 2 or 3 practical examples. We've got to get the economy working. We've got to get wealth creation, but it needs to be everywhere across the country. And that is what I want to change. Not going back to economic growth that is in some parts of the country, but not all parts of the country. With the NHS, obviously, we need to fix it, but I want to do more than fix it. I want to make sure it's fit for the future. So that means bringing it closer to people, recognising the way in which disease and illness has changed, making sure we're using technology as we go forward. And the other thing is changing the relationship between the state and people.
But I think that is part of the challenge, is does this new sort of mantra from Starmer about patriotic renewal, does that do the thing that many of his critics would acknowledge he's found so difficult to do in the last 14 months? Does that tell a story? Does it tell a real story that people can connect with and go, yeah, that guy's on my side and I want him to lead me to a better country, and it's credible and convincing and it actually calms down what is the very real conversation about his leadership? He didn't want to talk about it today. The very latest opinion poll suggests if there were an election right now, Labour would have fewer than 100 seats. So how much trouble are you in?
Well, Laura, we won last year in July a mandate to change the country.
How much trouble are you in right now?
I always said that would take time. We will be judged at the next election, quite rightly, on whether we have improved living standards, people feel better off, on whether the public services are better, particularly the NHS, and whether people feel safe and secure in their own community.
But I'm asking you about the situation right now, because there are a lot of people in your own party coming here to Liverpool who really worry about what's been going on. Do you accept that you are in political trouble?
Laura, in politics, there are always going to be comments about leaders and leadership, particularly at times like conference.
There aren't always polls that put the governing party so far behind.
I always focus on what is it we're trying to achieve. What are we delivering?
In the end, he did say, give me space. And I thought that is another one of the sort of news stories that will come out of it, because it's more than saying, oh, there's always chatter about leadership. And he tried that tack. But in the end, he did sort of plead to his party, the restless bits of it, just to give him some time and give him some space.
Well, and as you said, he tried initially to say, oh, well, there's always chatter about leadership. But we know, and he knows, and we know that he knows, this is not normal. 14 months into his premiership, 14 months after winning a stonking parliamentary landslide, even if in vote share it wasn't quite so impressive, he should not be facing questions about his leadership. And I need to stress again, because I think it is important to, for those out there who are still supporters of Keir Starmer and people who want to hear more discussion of policy and so on, this is not some media confection.
No, not at all.
This comes from his own MPs, in some cases his own ministers, in fact, in a few cases, his own cabinet ministers. They are privately and semi-privately in conversations with people like me and Laura entertaining the possibility of ditching Keir Starmer as leader perhaps within months. That is an astonishing verdict from his own troops on the way in which he has led them since July 2024.
And I'm really glad that you said that, Henry, because it is sometimes the case. You know, great stories come out of people being rude about their leaders. That is part and parcel of political journalism. But this is something different. And Paddy, we did, suggest to people if they wanted to read more about it, that there was a very helpful piece on the BBC website full of quotations and views from people right across the Labour Party and indeed in Whitehall who are very worried about what is going on with this government. Paddy, what else stood out to you?
I noticed that he didn't really want to be interrupted as well, but he wants space, but not when he's answering.
Yeah, well, politicians don't like to be interrupted, do they? They don't like it at all. And sometimes also, newscasters might want to know, sometimes it's better to let them to get one or two things off their chest before you then start to try to go in to actually get them to answer a question. And I used to find that actually with Boris Johnson, the most sensible thing to do was to let him give one first very, very, very long answer. Because if you tried to interrupt his first answer, you'd never get anywhere. So it was quite a bit, let him get his script out. What, though, Henry, I was intrigued by was Keir Starmer's answer to one of our questions about whether or not the government might raise VAT. And I don't think he gave us a clear answer to that question. Do you?
Not quite, no.
Will you rule out raising VAT?
Well, Laura, just on the first point of your question, if I may, I came into politics to change lives for the better, to change our NHS and make sure that it was fit for purpose, to win investment in for jobs across the country. We've got record investment coming in.
Will you rule out raising VAT to pay for that?
We've done massive exercise in Sizewell, where thousands of jobs now will be created as a result of that. The work we did with the US just a week ago on civil nuclear,
that's jobs in raising VAT to pay for the public services?
That is why I'm in politics, to change lives. It's not a popularity contest for me. It's about changing lives. On the question of the budget, obviously the budget will be in November, as you know, and I'm not going to sit here and set out what's going to be in the budget.
No, hang on,
you
Prime
know
Minister.
That isn't going to
on
happen.
Dozens and dozens and dozens of occasions, you ruled out raising VAT. It's in the solemn document of your party's manifesto. You're the Prime Minister of this country. Can you rule out raising VAT?
The manifesto stands.
So
we
you
made
rule out
commitments
raising
in
VAT?
that manifesto, and the manifesto stands.
And income
Obviously,
tax?
the details, the manifesto stands. We made those commitments. But
And they will not be unpicked?
The manifesto stands, Laura. It can't be clearer than that.
Well, you can. It's a different thing saying the manifesto stands right now, or are you saying actually it will stand in perpetuity? You're not going to unpick those promises?
Well, we put that manifesto before the electorate. We got elected, and that manifesto stands. I'm not going to go through the details of what maybe in the budget. Obviously, it's 2 months away, and no Prime Minister and no Chancellor would ever sit here and indicate 2 months out what may or may not be in the budget.
He said the manifesto stands, and as a reminder, their manifesto committed to not increasing the main rates of income tax, employees' national insurance, or VAT. I mean, they actually said national insurance in the manifesto, so there's an argument.
Taxes for working people,
but,
yes.
Whatever. I think saying the manifesto stands provides just a touch more leeway than saying we're not going to increase VAT. I mean, I don't know what you think is afforded as a possibility there. I think maybe about bringing more kinds of things into the scope
VAT.
of VAT, for example. Then you're not increasing the rate, you're broadening the application. I don't know, but clearly he wanted to keep that option just a little more open than by saying, no, I'm not touching VAT.
Can I chip in? Because, I mean, the phrase, the manifesto stands on a Monday, can be replaced on a Tuesday with the manifesto no longer stands. And he would be in the company of many of our recent governments since the war who've said to the public, things have changed. The evidence has changed, so I've had to change.
And that's why it was intriguing, and I think that opposition parties might leap on this. I did give him the opportunity to say, in a different way, I will not touch the VAT rates, and he didn't. And he gave us that answer, which we're going to hear lots of times, like, oh, well, there's a budget coming up, so I'm not going to talk about this. Actually, that is nonsense. This Prime Minister has dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of times said, I rule out ever raising VAT. He did not say that explicitly this morning, although Labour voters and Labour spinners, you might be screaming at this and thinking, but the manifesto stands. That was his position, and it is not exactly the same as saying, there's no way we'll touch it.
And I think one risk for the Prime Minister, of the many political risks that face him,
Which one?
is that, I mean, you've had a great exchange, Laura, with him about ID cards and the reason that he's pursuing the national digital identification, which is a significant change of position, by the way, since just a few months ago.
And for a former human rights lawyer who's into, civil liberties,
Absolutely.
it's an interesting position.
Absolutely.
If you really believe that those profiting from human trafficking will think, oh dear, I have to check your digital ID now. I can't carry on paying you £1.50 an hour to work in my sweatshop.
I am absolutely convinced that amongst the reasons that people travel through France, which is a safe country, to come to the United Kingdom, amongst the reasons is because it's easier to work in our illegal economy than it is in other countries. And we have to deal with that.
Bosses who are prepared to hire people illegally are not asking them for their national insurance card. So what's the evidence? What makes you think they're suddenly going to ask them for a digital ID?
We need to be really clear. You must have ID, mandatory digital ID, in order to work, because we have to stop illegal working. If you look at any of the raids, we've massively increased the number of raids on working premises. It is absolutely clear that people are working illegally in numbers.
But why do you think that them
having
a digital ID, having to have a digital ID, would stop that problem when right now people are meant to have a national insurance number and card, and if they're not asked for that, a boss is willing already to break the rules? What's the difference going to be?
Well, the difference is this is on point of starting, not a retrospective exercise as it now is. It is an automatic collection of the information by the government, so we know exactly who is working in our economy, and it will help us enforce the rules that are there. But there's no point people saying to me, why do we need it, when we all acknowledge there is a problem. People are working illegally in our economy. It is amongst the reasons that people want to come to the United Kingdom. We have to deal with that.
There's been a little bit of polling which suggests that since Keir Starmer announced that the government was going to do this, the public support for a policy of national ID has decreased significantly. And, you'd hazard a guess quite reasonably that the cause of that is that an unpopular Prime Minister has made it his policy, and therefore the public aren't so into it anymore. And I just think, if he is working his way up to making an argument at the budget that, look, I'm going to have to level with the British people, times have changed, things are going on globally, and therefore I am actually reluctantly going to have to put up taxes in a way I didn't foresee 14 months ago. Keir Starmer starts from such a position of unpopularity. By the measure of one poll today, by the way, the most unpopular Prime Minister ever in recorded history. It would be difficult even for a popular Prime Minister to carry that off. And that is why I think so many Labour politicians do see the next few days as a real fight for Keir Starmer's political life.
It's very interesting. And it's also worth making the point that in hard times, politicians can still be popular, because often their answer is, well, we're doing badly in the polls. It doesn't really matter because everything's really difficult. So automatically, therefore, people aren't going to like us. Actually, that's not true. Politicians can be popular in difficult times when they're having to do hard things. Not always, but it's not a complete get out just to say, oh, well, things are tricky and people feel cross and therefore automatically we're going to be popular. So Labour Party members, don't worry about it. They are worried about it. They are very, very worried about it. And, one minister said to me this week, he is vulnerable. He is incredibly vulnerable. Yeah, I don't mean an immediate, we were talking about this yesterday, Paddy, I don't think an immediate, there's not going to be a sort of push tomorrow in case, unless Andy Burnham turns up somewhere along the esplanade behind us and starts kind of leaping back into everybody's imaginations. Yeah, but it doesn't feel great up here for the party, Paddy, I've got to say.
Well, it's the avenues and alleyways of conferences, isn't it? You can meet all for 3 days, you can fulminate, you can gossip. And there's a great shot we had offered by our BBC colleagues in Liverpool of Henry's head against one of the towers of the building behind, making it look like a sort of a mystery film. I don't know if we're going to see that again, as I ask you. We've now got... Yes, there we are. Now, look,
well, that's not any old tower, Paddy. That's the Liver building.
No,
that's
I know.
The Liver Bird at the top. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I want to say, no, you're not seeing my time. I just said that is just exactly that's the place to ask you. with this iconic building. The Prime Minister's tax affairs are now coming into play with, of all things, the donkey field that we'd heard about before, and whether or not he put this in a trust which would have the effect of, in the future, sealing it against inheritance tax. Is this a non-issue or an issue?
I think it's too soon to say, actually. It's a very interesting, detailed piece by probably the finest newspaper investigative journalist in the country, Gabriel Pogrund, and Dan Needle, tax expert, who's been involved in various different scrutinising various different politicians' tax affairs. What's interesting, though, is that as I read the Sunday Times story, and it's too complicated for me to accurately summarise it now, I'm afraid, off the top of my head, but as I read it, they essentially took it that Keir Starmer had put this field that he bought for his parents to have donkeys in into a trust. He specifically denied that to you, Laura.
He did,
which
and
I
that's
think
new.
confounds quite a lot of what the Sunday Times and Dan Needle thought the explanation was. So I think a lot of people are going to have to process what exactly is going on there.
And I think the interesting thing about it is that it had never been on the record. I think for the journalists who've been pursuing this excellently, and it's worth saying Dan Needle, who's been involved in this, is a Labour Party member. So this is not some, kind of thing got up by political rivals. It seemed to me that one of the issues was that Keir Starmer had never been willing to clarify whether or not he had put this into trust. Today he did. What does that mean for where this story goes next? Like you, I don't know, but it was important to try to get him explicitly on the record, and he did put on the record that it had never been a trust. There's more detail in reporting from the Sunday Times today about a piece of land you bought for your parents many years ago. Did you put it into a trust?
No, I didn't. I bought a field for my mum and my dad because they loved donkeys, and my mum was very ill and she couldn't move around anymore. She, by the end of her life, had her leg amputated and she could barely communicate. She was very, very ill. She loved her donkeys, and I wanted her to be able to see her donkeys. I was a lawyer, I had quite a lot of money. I bought a field for £20,000 at the back of their house, and I said, here's your field, it's yours for as long as you may live. You could put your donkeys in it.
That's because that's been the question.
I didn't create a trust. I simply bought a field, and I said to Mum and Dad, this is for you.
Okay.
It was, and also, by the way, Laura, it was £20,000. We're not looking at a vast estate with great tax.
It's a lot of money to many people, and you sold it many years later
It is a lot of money, but the idea of setting up some complicated trust for a £20,000 agricultural field, which then housed 4 donkeys for all the time my mum and dad. It was my mum. She was able. They had a little outhouse at the edge of the field, and she was able, in the end, to see the donkeys. And my dad built a little sort of porchway so he could wheel the wheelchair out so she could touch the donkeys. That's what it was for, and I gave it to them.
I
had enough money at the time because I was a lawyer. It was a gift to my mum and dad.
And that's now on the record. You did not put it in trust, and that's not been on the record before, and that is now on the record. Whether we'll be talking about donkeys and tax returns over the next few months, I cannot tell you the answer to that right now.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the Prime Minister does not need, to state the obvious, another distraction about his own, or for that matter, any minister's tax or personal affairs. I mean, he has had, and we've said it before, but we should say it again, he has had, I think, like the worst conceivable 2 or 3 weeks that any Prime Minister could conceivably have. He's trying to move on. He needs as few distractions as possible as he tries to move on. Otherwise, who knows where things could go.
I could watch and listen to that scene in Liverpool for every weekend newscast. It looks magisterial. It's full of insight.
You're trying really hard to exile us from the studio.
No, I just think there's really no...
See, I was taking it nicely, and now you cynical hacker, actually...
Well, that's the difference.
That means he doesn't want us there.
No, there's no need for me to come to work. I just think that you've done it all for us, you two. I feel as though I've interposed, but I've also listened with great interest. Thank you very much indeed for the summary of it. I feel we're cantering towards a conclusion. So before we do, we look ahead to the conference highlights, I suppose. It does begin in the hours ahead.
Big speech is Tuesday for the Prime Minister. Chancellor's speech will also be a big moment, because don't forget the backdrop to all of this is the economy not being in brilliant shape and public services not being as well funded as many Labour Party people would want them to be. So that will be big. I think we're going to get quite a political speech from Rachel Reeves this time round, which is something worth watching for. And the Tuesday Prime Minister's speech, is just a huge moment for all the reasons that we've been discussing.
And those around the Prime Minister keep saying, no one will be in any doubt come the end of this speech what Keir Starmer believes, what his values are. And clearly, from the tone of the interview today, that means it will be about combating Reform UK. And by the way, take a step back. It's incredible that Labour conference, as Lib Dem conference was last week, is totally focused about fighting a political party which was, you know,
fit all their
essentially
MPs in a mini
15, 16
Yeah.
months ago and still only has 5 MPs.
Yeah.
But I think the thing with, you know, everyone in the Labour Party, whatever shade of Labour opinion thereof, agrees that Reform UK are terrible, agrees that a Reform UK government would be terrible. But within that, there's still an awful lot of disagreement. You know, Keir Starmer said today he's thought for years that the Labour Party has got its approach to immigration wrong. Well, actually, there are an awful lot of people in the Labour government, let alone the Labour Party, who would disagree with that. So
and I'm not sure Keir Starmer, I don't remember Keir Starmer really saying that very loudly or proudly many years ago. However, I think you're absolutely right. It's going to be a fascinating few days, and you will be covering every twist and turn here as Paddy and I go to our days off?
Yes, we go and lie down in a darkened room surrounded by hip flasks and hot water bottles. So it's, with all the excitement to come, and congratulations on the scoops from Liverpool. It's goodbye from London.
And Paddy, we should say goodbye to you from this glorious big wide shot of all of Liverpool.
Yes, I'm absolutely envious. It looks glorious. With more to come this week. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.